selected as an, oh, we're live.
Here we go. I think we might be live. Hi, everybody. Pete Bombachi here, the GenWell project and our Connected Conversation series getting started for season 2 with some conversations that our hope will help people keep people connected at a time when many of us are feeling like we can be a little disconnected at times or maybe a little overwhelmed with the challenges that we're facing today. Most of you probably know that the GenWell Project's a Human Connection movement started in 2016, hopefully to educate people on the importance of human connection in their lives, and more importantly, catalyze people around the idea of taking action. We need each other more than ever during COVID times, but we may need each other even more as we continue forward and face some of the challenges that we're going to face post-COVID-19. We are thrilled to have Kasley Killam today to speak about the importance of human connection in our lives. And just before I get started with Kasley, a huge shout out and thank you to Akrit Michael, who is working the board today and helping us put this production together. He's a volunteer from a local college in Toronto. Let's hear it for all the young people who've stepped up during these challenging times to help us stay connected through technology, but also in helping us all find purpose in what we do to help make the world a happier and healthier place. So, Krit, thank you for everything that you're doing to help bring connected conversations to the people around us. And a huge thank you also to JP Weiser, our partner, who helps us fund the idea of spreading this important message of human connection to people across this country and around the world. We are thrilled, Kasley, to have you here today. You and I have been in conversation now for probably about 6 months, but we've never actually had a conversation. It's all been through technology, and I am just thrilled to finally get to meet you face to face as well as we can through virtual technology. Welcome to Connected Conversations.
Thank you so much, Pete. Thank you for inviting me on to do this. And likewise, I'm so thrilled to actually be in conversation with you.
Yeah, honestly, Kasley, I really do, in reading everything that you've put out there, I really do look at you as a leader in the space of human connection and understanding how important it is for our health and how important it is for people to understand something that maybe we haven't been educated on in our past. But let me do a formal introduction for you because you certainly deserve it. And then we can dive into some of the conversation that I think will enlighten people and hopefully, I guess catalyze them to actually take action because we can all benefit from it right now as well. Kasley is a social scientist, community builder, and public health consultant who specializes in how human connection influences our physical and mental health. She holds a master's degree from the Harvard School of Public Health and writes for Scientific American and Psychology Today. Kasley, again, we're just thrilled to have you because your insight and knowledge on this subject is what we've been talking about for 4 years, and I sense that maybe even you've been talking about it much longer than that.
Yes, I have indeed been passionate about this topic for a little while.
Yeah, I love it. Hey, you know what? We always start off our Connected Conversations with a really important question is we want to check in with the people that we're talking to because oftentimes, self-care for those that are leading and trying to change the world is not something we think about because we think that everybody else is great, just not the people that are trying to help. So we want to check in with you and say, how are you holding up during COVID-19?
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that. I'm doing well despite, as best as one can during these circumstances. It was really interesting when the country first shut down and this really took over our lives. I was actually completing my degree at the Harvard School of Public Health. It was a very surreal experience to be studying public health amidst one of the, biggest public health crises in recent history. So I've been, really intentional about just maintaining my own health habits, whether that's stretching every day and trying to get regular exercise, whether that's feeling really a sense of meaning and purpose, being able to contribute to this conversation. I mean, all of a sudden, my kind of area of focus and expertise and passion was brought to light in a very new way. And although I wish it wasn't under these circumstances, I'm happy that I'm able to contribute to that conversation, and also really just prioritizing connection with loved ones. You know, I'm lucky to live with my partner, and although I'm not able to see my family for a while, I'm making sure to stay connected with friends and family from afar.
I think it's so beautiful. Unfortunate that you were finishing off your degree at the time this came out. But I think out of everything you said there was a really powerful word in there for me, and that was intentional. And I think that's the important thing for all of us to think about. Again, something I often say is I think the natural inclination for all of us is to, when we're in times of stress or anxiety, we might think about going for a run or going outside or going for a walk in nature. We think about eating better. But I don't think most of us are intentional about thinking about how important human connection is for our health. And, obviously we're going to dig deeper into that, but I love hearing the intentionality that you have. And also the other thing, in season 1, we spoke to a lot of, positive psychologists and psychologists in general, and workplace mental health. And everybody was control the things that you can control, because we can't control everything right now.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I started my career studying positive psychology. And so that field had a big influence on my thinking as well.
Oh, that's interesting. That's good to know. I didn't have that background, so that's wonderful. So I think the first question, and I think the one that certainly a lot of people are wondering is, what impact do you think COVID-19 is having on people's social connections, and how is it that the lack of ability to connect and maybe even physically touch people and hug and high five and all that stuff that we love to do, how do you think that's impacting people right now?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, obviously, this is a very difficult time for everyone in different ways. There's a lot of fear of catching or transmitting the disease. There's a lot of anxiety about the economic consequences of this. There's stress of just navigating this new normal that we're living in, whether that's being a parent and trying to take care of kids and also teach them and also maintain a full-time job. It's influencing us all in really difficult ways. And I think some of the research that's come out on things like anxiety and depression levels are alarming, because they are higher than they were before the pandemic. At the same time, there are silver linings. I think this has drawn attention to a lot of the issues that we need to address as a society and as a culture, whether that's social isolation and loneliness, or whether that's changes that need to be made to our healthcare system, to our public health infrastructure. Other silver linings are, for those of us who are fortunate enough to be able to work from home, I know I've certainly found a new balance. I mean, in my role at Verily prior to going back to grad school, I was commuting, 2 hours a day. And now I have that time to kind of reconnect with myself, to drink coffee outside and read, call a loved one. So there are certainly silver linings like that. And the biggest one, most relevant to our conversation, that I'm seeing is really a greater recognition of the importance of our relationships in our personal lives. And so I think, being isolated, having to quarantine, being separated like this, it is challenging. Like you said, the physical touch aspect is really important. I wrote an article a few years ago called "A Hug a Day Keeps the Doctor Away" that talked about the research on how important physical touch and social support are for our immunity to catching colds, things like that. And I think people are realizing that and being intentional about prioritizing connection in new kind of pandemic safe ways. There's also kind of greater empathy for the fact that a lot of people experienced isolation and loneliness prior to the pandemic. This isn't a new phenomenon. It's just that now we're kind of all thrust into this forced situation. So I am seeing that, people are being more intentional about their relationships. There's that word again, being intentional. And I think that could be a real positive to come out of this.
Yeah, I think it's really powerful to see, and it's tough. In season 1, in our conversations, we heard a lot of people talk about, when I would say, "How are you holding up?" the first thing a lot of people would say would be, hey, look, I'm not worried about food, water, shelter, safety, and security. And for those, it's easier for us to find the silver linings quickly versus those who may be suffering with some of the greater challenges, the more fundamental needs that we have in life. So certainly, we're blessed to actually have that opportunity. You said a couple of things there. I was listening to a webinar yesterday, or it was a recording of a webinar with Julianne Holt-Lundstad, who was talking about, and I'm sure you know her. If you don't know her personally, I'm pretty sure you do. But at the end of the day, she was talking about how 6% of the society is truly isolated and lonely. But the rest of us are having an opportunity to have a feeling of what that disconnection and what that isolation might feel like. In the studies or the research that I've read, certainly it's 50% of CEOs can feel it. We know that young people struggle with it. We've obviously become very conscious of what seniors are dealing with. And I think, the really interesting thing is maybe we didn't know how to describe it or actually acknowledge it before. But do you think COVID might have made it easier for everybody to kind of empathize with those who may be feeling isolated, lonely, or a word I like to use is just feeling disconnected?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think this is really an opportunity for us to empathize. I think that's a great way of putting it. Unfortunately, we're all getting a taste of what it feels like to be alone or to feel disconnected, as you said, from other people. And I'm noticing that it's catalyzing a lot of innovation in this space. There's a much larger conversation. Many more people are talking about this. It's almost a dinner table topic now. And that's great because it means that we can move forward away from talking about the problem and really focusing on solutions.
It's interesting. The fact that everybody's talking about it is a beautiful step in the right direction. But it still strikes me, Kasley, that there's a lot of people who don't really... Again, I've said, that we were taught to go to the gym. We were taught to eat better. If you're really modern, you were told to become a vegetarian. You were told to cross train. But I still feel like a lot of people don't understand just how important it is. So maybe you could tell us a little bit of a few of the facts behind human connection as it relates to our physical and mental health, and then maybe a perspective on why don't we know it? And even when people hear it, I sense people still dismiss it because they just can't believe it can have this type of an impact on our health.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the research has shown clearly, as clear as night and day, that human connection is not a nice to have. It is absolutely an essential ingredient to our physical health, to our mental health, to our overall well-being, to our longevity. It's actually incredible how much research has now demonstrated this. And I think to your question of why we don't initially realize that connection is a health habit, which it is because it took a while for that research to be done. It took a while for that to be disseminated. And now, more and more people are reading articles about this and having conversations like this, where they're learning that actually, if you have close social relationships, that helps prevent you from getting colds, that helps reduce your risk of cardiovascular disease and heart attacks. It helps improve your recovery rate from illnesses. It even influences your mortality as much as things like smoking cigarettes, which is just crazy. But also it influences your mental health as well. So there's association between loneliness and conversely social relationships with cognitive decline, with depression, with suicidal ideation. The list goes on. And so I think, we often think about physical health as just eating healthy foods and getting a good night's sleep and exercising regularly, and those are essential. But I think it's important that we start thinking more holistically and recognize that our physical and mental and social health and well-being are all intimately connected, and that if we actually spend time with loved ones and nurture those close relationships, that too is as powerful for our physical and mental health and longevity as any of those other behaviors. So I think it just was about taking time to do that. I think one of the studies that I found to be most powerful was Robert Waldinger describes this in his TED Talk, where he describes the 75-year study and counting, actually, it's still ongoing, out of Harvard, where they followed individuals for 75 years and measured everything that you could measure, whether that's, genetics, as well as behaviors like diet, like sleep, as well as environmental factors like where they live and what their employment is. And of all the things that they measured, this was a really comprehensive study. The single biggest predictor of long-term physical and mental health and happiness was social relationships. Yeah. And so it takes education about things like that for people to realize that it is a health habit. And I think that's really the message that I hope to share through my work, is that it can be helpful to think of social health and well-being as a dimension, just like we think about physical and mental health, because connection is so imperative for our well-being.
Well, Kasley, I hope when you do your work that you don't leave us behind, because I think our paths are pretty aligned in what we're trying to accomplish. And I chuckle when you talk about Dr. Waldinger's study, because I have probably had 100 people send me his TEDx talk over the course of the last 4 years and say, "Hey, did you know about this thing?" And as I've said,
great. That's increased awareness, right? I mean, that's what we want, is people to know about it. That's fabulous.
It is funny you should say that, because in the last month, I've had 4 or 5 people reach out to me with scenarios that they've gone through where they made the connection and said, it was a lady who'd been diagnosed with cancer for the 4th time.
Wow.
Who posted something on Facebook saying that she was lonely. And so this person immediately said, I know from the GenWell project that what I need to do is reach out to that person and have a conversation. Somebody who'd lost a job, somebody who was going through a divorce, and unfortunately somebody who was threatening to take their life, and somebody talked them down. That person didn't know about GenWell, but the person who they shared the story with said, what you just did was actually made that person feel like they belonged. And that connection, and then obviously that story being told, maybe we are getting the message through bit by bit.
Yeah, and also through personal experience. And right now, because we're all experiencing that isolation due to the pandemic, maybe that's the collective experience that we need to really hone that message in and internalize it.
Yeah. So to the point of, people are slowly coming up. I think, and I love your perspective. I think most of the research is really, end of the 90s, early 2000s. Obviously, then the cell phone comes along. So we've got the knowledge is just coming out, and B, now we've got more distractions than ever before, and the most disconnected world. Even though we were in the greatest growth era in the history of the world, where you would think we would have taken some beautiful steps to keep us all together. But, the UK goes and launches a loneliness minister. What other steps have you seen around the world that you think are really indications of people stepping up and trying to, again, catalyze the world, on the education front, because I think that's first step in any behavior change, but then 2, in actually getting people to take action?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I think I'll answer in 2 ways. The first is that I'm seeing a huge rise in kind of startups and organizations who are taking this problem on. So a month or so ago, I released a document where I'd curated over 120 different startups whose mission is directly to reduce loneliness, promote connection, help people make new friends, help people deepen their relationships, help them connect to their community. So there's been a huge swell of that kind of innovation and novel approaches, whether it's using technology or not, in the last few years, and especially now during the pandemic. The second trend I'm seeing is recognition of this issue at kind of the national level through government. So, for example, right now I'm on the judging panel for this national competition in the US that's led by the Department of Health and Human Services, and specifically the Administration for Community Living, that is going to award a large amount of funding to someone to build out excuse me, a social engagement platform where people can go and search for opportunities that are tailored for them to plug into the local community, meet new people, things like that. I'm also next week moderating a panel at this summit that's led by the National Coalition to End Social Isolation and Loneliness, which is a huge coalition bringing people from all different sectors. I mean, on the panel alone that I'll be moderating, we have individuals who represent transportation, healthcare, tech, nonprofit. It's really cross-functional, which is very exciting. There's also a lot of policy initiatives in the US. So recently, there was a bill proposed just in August called the Strengthening Social Connections Act that was specifically around recognizing that we need to allocate resources to people's mental health and to address social isolation and loneliness. So I'm seeing a lot of initiatives like that more than ever before. And I think now is the moment to kind of harness that energy and the fact that the lens is focused on this issue to really create a cultural change.
Yeah, I think it's the time is now. There's nothing, unfortunately, as a couple people have commented, maybe the greatest thing that could have ever happened to a human connection movement.
Pete, you are frozen for me. I don't know if you can hear me. I think we're having a technical glitch, which is all part of the fun in a pandemic. So we'll hang tight for a second to see if we can reconnect. Thanks everyone who's joining live or watching this later. Yeah, we'll get this sorted out and keep going. Well, since it looks like it's just me on the floor right now, I will share that if you're interested in this topic, I host a weekly chat with different innovators and researchers and entrepreneurs who are working on social health and social well-being. That's on Instagram Live. So if you're interested, you can tune in for that. Yeah, it's very similar to kind of what Pete's doing here with these conversations. Hopefully he gets back on soon. Well, while they're sorting that out, oh, hey!
Oh my God! Welcome to working from home in this this new world. That literally, my Wi-Fi just shut down completely and disconnected us. So I'm really sorry about that, Kasley.
No worries at all. It actually happened to me last week while giving a talk as well, mid-presentation. So it happens. It's part of the new world that we're living in.
Yeah. I don't think any of the cell providers or the Wi-Fi, the internet providers had planned on having 8 billion people looking to get their home service up to the same speed as the office.
Absolutely. Well, I'm glad you're back now.
Thank you so much. And so let me continue on here and just say, okay, so we're in a pandemic. Mm-hmm. Certainly, as some people had suggested, that maybe it was the greatest thing that could have happened to, the GenWell project as a human connection movement, but even in raising the consciousness in general terms about the need for human connection. And I know I've seen some of the research coming out during the pandemic on how people are responding. But do you think, you think of the 2008 crisis, the stock market, Black Monday or whatever it was, do you think this will be the awakening, and will we see the change that I think many of us would like to see in regards to people not only getting connected, but people feeling more comfortable? In Canada, for example, only 50% of people know their next door neighbor's name. We know that people were disconnected when they went to the workplace. I think the 73% of people didn't feel engaged when they went to work. We know that I think it's 73% of students felt extremely isolated and lonely at some point in the last school year, in the school year that just before the pandemic. Obviously there's a lot of emotional barriers and physical barriers. We build taller fences in our backyards, automatic garage doors. Do you think that this will be a wake-up call that people will respond to this time around? Because if we were looking for a pause, and I certainly wrote a blog, 5 or 6 years ago about the much needed reset. If we needed a reset and a pause, is this big enough to actually make change?
Yeah, it's a really great question. Oh, I'm getting some echo. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you great.
Okay.
No echo on this end.
Okay, great. Yeah, I'm optimistic. To answer your question, I am optimistic that this is what we need, not what we wanted, but what we need to really wake us up about the importance of social relationships for our health. I wrote an article about a month or two ago in Scientific American called "In the Midst of the Pandemic, Loneliness Has Leveled Out." So there's some really interesting research that's come out in the last few months that suggested that we may indeed be kind of recognizing the importance of this in our lives. So one study in particular surveyed a group of people, I think from ages 18 to 98, so the full age spectrum across the US at 3 different times. So they did it in January and early February, kind of before the pandemic had really hit the US. They did it, I think, in late March, once people were physically distancing and kind of stuck at home, and then again in, I believe, late April or early June. And at each of those times, they assessed people's level of loneliness using the UCLA loneliness scale, which is kind of the gold standard to assess that. And they also just asked people, do you feel like you get the social and emotional support that you need? And they found that there were no significant changes in loneliness across that time period, and that in some cases, people's sense of social and emotional support had actually increased. So this is really surprising. I mean, I was one of many social scientists at the beginning of the pandemic who was really worried that it would get a lot worse, and that due to social isolation from necessary quarantines, we would all be feeling a lot lonelier. But it doesn't seem like that's been the case. There's some other research that has suggested that it is, but they didn't have the same sample followed from before and after. So the study was unique in kind of its methodology. So anyway, long technical answer to get at the fact that I am optimistic. I think that suggests that people are resilient and we're able to bounce back and we're able to find ways to stay connected despite the circumstances. And my hope is that those habits will really become ingrained and will become part of our day-to-day life, and that moving forward, when the world does open back up and we're able to kind of return to our busy lives, that we're still going to value that and still make time for it, whereas we didn't before.
Yeah, that's a great hope, a great wish. As you may not fully know, but the GenWell project was originally inspired by a summer blackout back in 2003. And the same thing that we found that day, and something that I witnessed, was, in times of crisis, we are an amazing human species. We are always there for each other. And I think the power right now is the fact we have a common, a lot of people, I think, stress with, what do I say to my neighbor? What do I do? Well, today, we all have something we can talk about. So, maybe we need to find some more commonalities. And that's really, the role of the GenWell project was first and foremost to educate people about the importance. We didn't set it up as a charity per se. There's no donation required to participate or take in any of our information. And then, the final part was about catalyzing people. And I do find it interesting that we have all of these days that we celebrate throughout the course of the year. I think this week is Mental Illness Awareness Week. And, so one of my aspirations and one of my goals, and maybe, what would you think about the concept of actually celebrating human connection for a day, a weekend, or a week? And that's what our GenWell weekends were all about. Instead of focusing on, it's not that we're focusing on the negative or the fear of the issues, but actually understanding that if we all celebrate human connection, If we
Mhm.
actually celebrate it and we raise the consciousness of everybody and don't put it to, we should get connected because we're old, or we should get connected because we got an issue, or we're sick, or what do you think about the concept? Well, what do you think about the GenWell project and how we're approaching the idea of rallying people around the concept of, hey, here's the information, and B, we need to get you connected, and we want to be the catalyst that through information or by creating those weekends, we can help you get connected.
Yeah, Pete, my thinking is so aligned with you on this, and I love the work that the GenWell movement does. I think sometimes people need a nudge, and it's like what we were chatting about earlier, that not everyone necessarily recognizes that connection as a health habit. And that the conversation doesn't have to be about social isolation and loneliness. If those terms turn you off and don't resonate with you, let's talk about the benefits of social support and of feeling connected to a community, and of feeling like there's someone you can call, excuse me, in the middle of the night if you're upset. So I think kind of focusing the conversation on that more asset-based, resource-based lens, and giving people a nudge is really powerful. Last week, I think it was last week, losing track of days, but September 28th, I think, was National Good Neighbor Day here in the US. I don't know if they have that in Canada, but I agree. We should work together to make a National Human Connection Day instead. But on Good Neighbor Day, I worked with the AARP Massachusetts task force to launch a statewide campaign called Reach Out MA, where it was very similar in theme, Pete, where we're trying to encourage people to reach out in pandemic safe ways to friends, family, neighbors, especially older adults who may live alone and be isolated, but really to everyone, and to start encouraging people to do that. And I think the more that we have those messages at the local level as well as at national and global levels, the better, because it does really take a little nudge now and then.
Yeah. The interesting thing is, when we were pulling this together, one of the things I recognized is, it's tough enough to get your family together because everybody's got busy schedules. Trying to get your neighbors together with, one of the silver linings that I've heard from a lot of people that have young kids is that they haven't had to truck their kids around to sporting activities every day after work. And that's actually provided the opportunity for them to connect with their neighbors because they were never around a lot of the time. And so I think the whole concept of rallying people around a particular day or a particular weekend is really about saying to everybody, hey, if we all know about this coming into it, then we can all put the time in our calendars to focus on this. Because if we do know all those benefits, if we do know it reduces anxiety and depression, and increases longevity and all the benefits that come with it, shouldn't we be making that a priority as government, as charities, as the health department and industry? The reality is, the time for a message and a movement like the GenWell project or Neighbors Days. And I will say, I think the real power is if we could get a country, a nation, or a globe working together so that we were all doing it same day around the world. We can certainly use oh my God, what is the environmental turn the lights off? I'm drawing a blank, Kasley.
Turn the lights off day?
Well, there's a day, oh my God, how am I drawing a blank on it, where we all turn our lights off in support of the environment. When we do it as a global organization and as a global species, I think it actually makes it easier, because the stigma of being old or struggling with a disease or illness, it's gone. It is about the celebration then when we all do it together. So, but I did see all your support and sharing for what was going on a couple weeks ago with Neighbors Day, and I thought that was awesome. But maybe we can all collaborate together, and certainly to those people that you're working with the tech solutions, we'd love any help you have. By the way, we haven't mentioned that you are a Canadian by birth.
I am. That's true. Yeah, I was born and raised in Vancouver.
I love that. And a Queen's grad as well.
I am indeed. Yep. Proud Queen's grad.
So, lots of Canadian, heritage being carried along with all the great work that you're doing. And, we certainly look forward to staying in touch with you and getting any insights that you have south of the border, because we are all in this together. We may be experiencing it different, But if we can build some bridges amongst streets and communities and neighbors, I think we truly can make the world a happier and healthier place, one face-to-face conversation at a time.
I couldn't agree more. Thank you so much, Pete, for spreading that message and doing the hard work of making it happen.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kaz. Hey, one last question.
Yeah.
This is the big one. Before we always end off, we'd love to know when this is all over, when we can get back to doing what we love to do and the things that we miss the most. What do you think the first thing that you're going to do when you can get back to doing what you want to do?
You know, I have a new niece coming along the way. She's going to be born in December, and I currently have no idea when I'm going to be able to meet her. So the first thing I will do is hop on a plane and go meet the newest member of my family.
Is that north or south of the border?
It's north. It's up in Canada.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully you get a chance to do that sooner rather than later, and I hope you'll keep me in the loop. Although I guess that's out probably on the West Coast. So we may not be able to cross paths this time, but I hope you and I get a chance to cross paths virtually or in person in the very near future. Kasley Killam, hearing your knowledge, your passion, and all the great efforts that you're making towards making the world a more connected place.
Thanks so much, Pete. I really appreciate you inviting me on. This was really fun. Thank you.
Great. All right. Have yourself an amazing day, and we'll look forward to chatting soon.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
All right. Stay connected.